they're stuck in on the way to work, don't you? I mean, they go in and out of London every day, and they get stuck in the same place. I used to work for breakfast television. And we used to do very early morning programs because it was breakfast television. That gives it away, doesn't it? So I used to be coming home out of London against the traffic when all the commuters were coming in. It was incredible. The traffic jams are all in the same place at the same time every morning. They're sitting there. Never so successful. And they go to work, and they get there, and they're really stressed because they've been in a jam all morning, and they're having a really nightmare time. And then they get in the car at night, and they drive back home, and they're having another nightmare time. And they get home late, and they're tired, and never go out with wife, and all that stuff, and they go to bed. And they get up in the morning, starts again. Well, they're ever successful. It's ever so successful. There's something in the city. Yes, a brat. I mean, you see in Japan they have people dressed in uniforms pushing commuters onto them trains. Have you seen that? You know someone who's successful in Japan because they're walking down the street like this. Been stuck in the train like that all morning, you know, against the wall, against the window. Oh, jeez. I'm sure I've got this vision, you know, of Martians going down the bar of a night, the opening line would be nice. Have you heard the latest about the Earthlings? And they're giving it, nah, they'd never do that, they would. Anyway, this guy's in this traffic jam this morning in Cardiff, and he's thinking, why do I go to work in a shirt and a tie? Am I any better at my job? No. So why do I do it? Because everyone else does it. What would I really like to go to work? I'd like to go to work dressed as a Native American. Next morning he did. Turns up. I think he got away with it because he didn't actually interact with the public. He's in an office, Cardiff Council. Turns up dressed as an Indian. And of course his mates think he's gone completely doolally, this guy. But he stuck at it. And he said a year later, he said they ended him. He says, because I'm being them and they daren't be themselves. But I'm being me. And this passing on across the generations of things that only exist because no one asks why is a colossal perpetuator of narcissism and control. You know, we have Roman Catholic priests who are celibate in the Roman Catholic Church today, 1997, because of what a Pope decided in 1074. What if this guy's wrong, like? It's possible. Imagine it, you leave your body, you disincarnate to another time-space dimension, and you get there, and you're still in earth mode, you know, Roman Catholic priest-like, so you've still got your legs crossed. And standing next to you is this spirit figure with a hat on. And you're standing there and you're going, oh, I had a hard incarnation there. I was a Roman Catholic priest. I had to be celibate all my bloody life. And this guy says, yeah, I was the Pope that decided that. What a killer. I mean, you'd give him a slapping, wouldn't you? But we accept these things. Just finally on this subject, Gaia, lady in Houston, 1993, said to me, got a great story, she said, sums up what you're saying. She said, when I first got married, she said, I was in the kitchen and I was cutting this corners off this ham, put it in the pan, put it in the oven, you know. He said, the husband came through the kitchen and said, why do you do that? Why do you cut the corners off the ham every time we have ham? She said, I don't know, my mother used to do it, what's the matter? He said, well, why do your mother cut the corners off the ham? She said, I don't know, what's the matter? He said, call your mother, ask her why she cut the corners off the ham. So she calls her mother, hello, Mum, you know when I was a girl and you used to cut the corners off the ham? Why did you do that? And her mother said, because my pan was never big enough, dear. Now, unless this husband, thank goodness, had said, why do you do that? She'd still be cutting the corners off the ham, and in the next generation, our children still be doing the same. So, if you can set the limits of the hassle-free zone, as I call it, acceptable thought and behavior, you trap the vast majority of the human race into your very narrow version of reality and behavior and view, because of the barbare mentality overwhelmingly, and of the fear mentality for the few who subsequently to then express the fact that they have. Not only that, you stitch up the global media. Because people, when people like me say the media are being used to manipulate and mind control and emotionally scramble the human race, that we must be saying that there's a manipulator in every newsroom saying, this is what you're going to write, don't write that. No need. Couldn't work like that anyway. But we've got an old saying in Britain which goes like this. You cannot bribe or twist the great British journalist, but seeing what they will do unbribed, there's no reason to. Because, having been a journalist for years, there is no more uninformed, manipulated profession on planet Earth than journalists. Because they're being bombarded by the official version of events all the time, and it sticks. And what does the media take as its point of reference by which it judges everything in terms of credibility, non-credibility, sane, insane, whatever? It takes as its reference point whatever the norms in society are. So anyone operating outside the hassle-free zone in terms of their lifestyle or view is immediately, if they're in the public eye, ridiculed or condemned by the media around the world, because that's the reference point they're taking for credibility, non-credibility, right, wrong, good, bad, and all that stuff. Which is why whatever country I go in, when I talk to people in the spiritual area or in the conspiracy area, they all say exactly the same about how their media treats them. Because the reference point is increasingly the same as we span the world with the same culture. It's actually my ambition before I leave this time-space dimension to enter some city somewhere in the world and not see a brilliant dance. That's my great ambition. I haven't cheated. I'm sure there are people somewhere in Canada and somewhere in Australia and somewhere in Britain that can make burgers without having them done by an American transnational corporation. I'm sure we can manage that. Anyway, the media takes as its reference point, therefore it judges the world from the point of the hassle-free zone. A few centuries ago, if we'd have had today's media, indeed it happened anyway, those who said the earth was round at that point were outside the hassle-free zone because it had decided at that point the reality was the earth is flat, Jerusalem's the centre of the universe. So people out here for saying the earth was a sphere were ridiculed and condemned. They were credible for saying it was flat. When the evidence became overwhelming that indeed the earth was a sphere, the hassle-free zone's version of reality flipped, and we had musical chairs. Those who said it was flat were now out here, and they've been ridiculed ever since for saying it, and those who said it was a sphere are now in here and have great credibility. So, in short, and this is so important as the foundation for this, if you can set the norms in society, you not only create a mental and emotional sheep pen for the vast majority of the human race because we ignore and give our power away, you also set the parameters from which the media reports the world. And then what you do is you break the herd up and play off against each other so there's constant conflict. You create retirement homes for the mind, called religions, political parties, economic theories, and then you play them off against each other. It's kind of interesting how you get the same theme with so many things that are set up to grab people's belief system. The Jehovah's Witnesses were set up by a guy called Charles Taze Russell, high-degree Freemason. The Mormons were set up by Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, high-degree Freemasons from the New York Lodge. The Ku Klux Klan, which is created tremendous fear, the four-letter word that controls the world, in the black community and conflict and stuff over the last, goodness knows how many years into the last century, was set up by a Freemasonic god in America called Albert Pike. And so if you create areas of belief systems and you play them off against each other because they're so self-righteous, you actually get the herd at war with itself. And above all that, there's a few people going, oh, a bit more there, thank you very much, thank you, more, thank you. And it's this self-righteousness, I guess, that's at the heart of it. Not allowing someone else the right to be different, because we've got the answers, you must believe it. So once this hassle-free zone is set, then you start the mind manipulation techniques, because this is a coup d'etat on the mind and the emotions, which are specifically aimed to get certain reactions. The most powerful of them, and the most used, it's used on us all the time, but once you kind of realise how it works, you never watch a news bulletin the same again, or in the White House statement, you can see it so clear. I call it problem, reaction, solution. This is a crack at this one. You create a problem in the world. It might be a terrorist bomb, it could be a run on a currency, at its most extreme, it could be a war. You then make sure someone else is blamed for it in the public mind, not you. You then go to stage 2 of this technique, and you get the media to report your manufactured event in the way you want it reported. And that's not difficult, because if you listen to a news bulletin and you listen to what the reporters are actually saying, 99% of the time, they're taking the official version of events, putting it in their own words and calling it reporting. You get things like, FBI sources said today this was responsible, or that's where they're looking. The White House said they feel there might be a so-and-so connection to this, and etc., etc. So you wind up public opinion in relation to your problem to the point where public opinion says what we hear all the time about events, this can't go on, something must be done, what are they going to do about it? And then comes the sting, where those who created the problem got that reaction, then openly, in political statements and in newspapers of the world, offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created. And what happens in this technique is that you not only avoid vast amounts of opposition to what you would get anyway if you'd done it straight on the line, you actually get vast amounts of people to demand you do it. Someone comes along and says, got this great idea. We're going to have more cameras all over the roads. We're going to have cameras in the streets, cameras in the city centres, cameras in the housing estates, what's happening in Britain and increasingly around the world. We're going to have more authoritarian laws. We're going to erode basic freedoms and give more powers to police and security agencies. We'd say, if it was done straight on like that, we'd say, excuse me, little word, that's a fascist state you're proposing. We're not having that. You let society break down so there is more crime. You emphasise crime in other areas to be worse than it really is. You get people in that four-letter word fear of being mugged, fear of having their house broken into, fear. And not only will they not oppose that little package, they will demand you introduce it. It's happening all over the world. I've travelled a lot of countries in the last year, all over the world, and two things are hit me. One is that the same problems are being orchestrated in every one of them. The same solutions are being offered, and, hallelujah, brother and sister, there is definitely a global spiritual awakening going on, which is going to bring this thing to an end. So problem, reaction, solution is an immensely powerful and constantly used technique. The Oklahoma bomb is a classic. The trials just started in Denver of a guy called Timothy McVeigh. This has every single element of problem, reaction, solution. First, you had the problem. 168 people killed in the Murrah building in Oklahoma in April 1995, April the 19th, 1995. Many of them children. You then get, understandably, the public reaction. Something must be done. What are they going to do about it? Within 24 hours, Bill Clinton was orchestrating the solution. He called for, quote, an easing of restrictions on the military's involvement in domestic law enforcement. 2 anti-terrorism bills have gone through Congress, giving more and more powers to security agencies and police, phone tapping, stop and search, all this stuff, and taking away basic freedoms, without a murmur, hardly, of complaint, purely on the back of an explosion in the Murrah building. Something must be done. And what happens is that within the first 24 hours, the media around the world, with a major event like this, has set the story in concrete. You go around the world and ask people about the Waco siege, ask them about Oklahoma, and they'll give you 99% of the time the version of events that was reported around the world within 24 hours of that event happening. Because as the true story starts to emerge and big questions start to emerge, suddenly the mainstream media that did that within 24 hours set in concrete doesn't want to know. What we're not being told, or the alternative media in America particularly is reporting, is that explosive experts writing in the alternative media and being interviewed in those magazines and stuff and radio stations, including a guy called Ben Partin, a former brigadier general, spent a long time in the military in explosives. They're pointing out that not only is the government's explanation of Oklahoma not true, it is utterly, utterly impossible. The first announcement through the media from the government was that that building was demolished virtually by a 1,000-pound fuel fertilizer device put together by a couple of guys in a barn. As these explosives people are pointing out, a 1,000-pound fuel fertilizer device will hardly blow the flipping windows out. By press release, it's amazing what you can do with a press release. By press release, that has now reached 4,800 pounds, as the creditability gap has been identified. The Ryder truck, I'm sure, is soon to become an articulated truck. They're also pointing out a little problem with physics. There was the bomb that was supposed to cause it. There is a massive pillar that was not demolished by the bomb, with an explosion going that way. And here behind it is another massive pillar that was completely demolished. Don't know if you've dabbled in physics, like. What these explosive experts are pointing out is the only explanation for this is the device was on that pillar and other pillars. Another interesting thing, the official explanation within 24 hours was that it was a reprisal by far-right mad conspiracy theorists against the Waco siege 2 years earlier, April the 19th, 1993. And the target was something called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms. It's an agency of the United States Treasury, of which apparently they have 3 treasuries in the United States. A lot of people know that, including me, so about 3 days now. It's funny then that the parents of some of the children who died in Oklahoma, who didn't buy the line after a while, there's too many holes in it, they started doing some investigations. And they've established that there was not one member of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms in that building when the explosion went off, nor one child from any of those people in the nursery. But they were in full combat here around an hour or so before outside the building. A grand juror called Hoppy Heidelberg was put onto the grand jury to investigate this Oklahoma bombing. And he was a bright man. And he started asking very simple questions, which the government did not want, or the hidden hand that controls the government, more to the point, didn't want questioned. They sacked him off the jury. So problem reaction solution is a colossally important and effective tool. And the way round it, or one way round it for me, is a very simple question. Who benefits? There was a playwright, Roman playwright, or he was old anyway, called Seneca. Seneca, rather. Sounds like a liver sulfur. Oh, wow, must have some Seneca. And he said something very, very true. He said, he who most benefits from a crime is the one most likely to have committed it. And if you ask the world, when we're being given the official version of an event, or what have you, it's who benefits from me believing this version of events? And when you ask that question, it's amazing how you turn away from who they're blaming to actually who the blamers are. Because who benefited from Oklahoma? Nobody, except those who wish to increase the powers of security agencies and take away basic freedoms of America. Who benefits from people who go crazy with guns? Anyone who wants to take arms out of the general population. And the people who go crazy with guns are not who they seem, as I'll come to when I talk about the second half of the mind control part of this. The goal, the structure this group of people are looking for, are looking to create by these methods and others, is this one. A world government at the top which would control all the major decisions taken in the world. They would control a world central bank, a world currency, and a world army, with nation-state armies dismantled under the guise of peace. Under that monumental structure would come three superstates. The European Union, and in Europe we are virtually there now. We are one decision away from having a single currency and a single bank in Europe. And that bank would be controlled by 6 unelected bankers with an 8-year guaranteed period of tenure. And it's actually in the Maastricht Treaty, which we've already signed, that the decisions of these bankers would not be able to be influenced or overruled by any other area of the Union, including the elected part. And that's important for people in Canada and Mexico and the United States and South America to hear, because they want to do exactly the same with something called the American Union, from the tip of North America to the tip of South America. The European Union Maastricht Treaty, which we've already signed, also means, and it will be the same here unless we wake up, that the gold and foreign currency reserves of every nation state in the European Union, at the point the single bank comes into operation, will move from control of nation-state governments under the control of the 6 unelected bankers in Frankfurt. And there's nothing in the treaty to allow those assets to come back if one of those nations wishes to pull out. The European Union evolved out of a free trade area called the Common Market, the European Economic Community. It's interesting. After problem, reaction, solution has got the foot in the door, then comes another mind controlling technique which comes on the end of it again and again and again. And that is what I call the stepping stones technique. You start here with what you can get away with, but you know that's what you're going to create. But you know that if you suggested that at the start, people will go crazy. Example, the end of the last war, if someone had come along and said, what we're going to do in Europe now is we're going to have a single bank, a single currency, controlled by 6 unelected bankers. We're going to have the political and economic centralized control of the whole of Western Europe and encompass the former Soviet Union countries also over a period of time into a vast superstate east and west. The reaction of people who just spent 5 years trying to stop that would have been, you must be joking, or words to that effect. So what did they do? They sold us what they could get away with at that time, and that was a free trade area. Interesting little point. Adolf Hitler had a vision, an economic vision for Europe had he won the last war. It had a long German name, which I can't pronounce. It's in the books, but I can't pronounce it, and I'd spit all over you, it's one of them words, But it translates exactly into English as the European Economic Community, which we got anyway. So once that was set, it's a free trade area, nothing to worry about. And by the way, if we don't join, we starve. That was the line. And then the stepping stones technique. Moving in small steps, each one projected at the public as being isolated and not part of a pattern, until you move into what was planned all along, the European Economic Community. It's at the European Union, rather. It's like growing up with a child in a house, this technique. You grow up with a child, you don't see the child change too much, day by day by day. Someone comes in who hasn't seen the child for months and their reaction is completely different. My goodness me, haven't you grown, haven't you changed, haven't you this? The person who's grown up with a child does not see that anything like as clearly because it's happening. And this is how this technique works. You evolve it along a period of time, and every time you turn on the news or television or read a newspaper, you're seeing it evolving slowly before your eyes, and you don't see the big picture. That is exactly what they're doing out of the North American free trade area. Indeed, when you look at it, they've only got to take in South America, which they control anyway, and it's there. In the Pacific, there's the Pacific Union, which is due to evolve in exactly the same way. If you find something that works, why not stick with it? Out of a free trade area set up in '94 called Icke, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, it's called. It's kind of interesting, so I'll come along. The people that set up the European Union and the EEC were people who were frontmen for this group I'm talking about. The people that set up NAFTA were frontmen for this group. George Bush, Brian Mulroney. And the people that set up that were frontmen for this group, not least the Australian Prime Minister at that time, or just before, called Bob Hawke. And then under this structure comes nation-states and what they wish to do with nation-states, which is break them up into regions to further disunite any opposition to the massive monster structure above. And that's being brought about by problem-reaction solution. Before I leave that subject, that's the problem-reaction solution of the Second World War. You have a global elite, as I call it, the people that control the banking system, the political system, the transnational corporations and stuff. They created the two sides and played them off against each other. It's my book, And the Truce to Set You Free, documents. They funded Lenin and Trotsky from Wall Street and London to go in and bring about the Bolshevik Revolution. They also put into power Joseph Stalin as one of their frontmen. They put into power in the other main allied countries in terms of the war anyway. In Britain, they put up Winston Churchill, the historical version of which is an absolute farce, I have to say. The more information that comes out, Winston Churchill was not the man that history projects him to be. In the United States, we had a major frontman of the 20th century for this group, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the man who put one of their major symbols, the pyramid and the all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid on every dollar bill when he was president of the United States. They then funded the Nazis and Adolf Hitler into power. Again, as the book documents, and other people have done so also, of course, that Hitler was funded, and his war machine was funded, via American loans known as the Dawes Plan and the Young Plan, and via the German subsidiaries of American multinational companies, not least the Rockefeller Standard Oil, that was very much connected with a conglomerate that was Hitler's war machine, in truth, called Icke. Also, Hitler was funded from London. It's interesting. Franklin Delano Roosevelt came to power in America in 1933 on the back of an economic collapse. Something must be done. Save us, Mr. Roosevelt. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power on the back of a massive economic collapse. Save us, Adolf. And the people, as we'll come to later, that control completely, whether there's boom or a bust, are the people that run the global banks that are owned by them. So, you then play the two sides off in a war. Why do all this? Because nothing changes the nature of a society or a world more than a war. After a war, in terms of it's a country war or whether it's a global war, whatever area is involved, that area is fundamentally changed forever by that conflict. And out of that, the Second World War in 30 years or so, came a massive global, understandable, this can't go on. What are they going to do about it? And the solution was the United Nations, Georgia, not war, and in Europe it was the European Economic Community, let's trade together and then we'll stop fighting each other. No, if you live in Europe, they can stop using weapons to fight each other. The United Nations started out as Georgia, not war, that's how it was sold to us. It now goes to war and is getting more and more power, not least the World Health Organization over the use of which is a tool, a complete tool of the global pharmaceutical companies. That's the structure. I used to be Michelangelo in a previous life. That's the structure that allows it to happen. All genius is simple, and this could only work if it was simple. That's basically the structure. In every organization today, no matter what it is, a university, a government, a school, a business, they're structured like that. At the top, you've got a tiny, tiny few people who know the big picture. They know what the real agenda is, what they're really trying to achieve. As you come down in any organization, you're meeting more and more and more and more people who know less and less and less and less about what the organization's really about. They only know their part. The human race is not evil.